Dungeons & Dragons, a pinnacle in the pillar of nerdom and geekocracy since its inception in the mid-1970s. And in many ways, it was the catalyst for the tabletop RPG scene that we see today.
Throughout the years, geeks, nerds, and theater kids have all flocked to Dungeons & Dragons in the hopes of escaping to a far-off fantasy land. However, over the last 5 to 9 years, there's been a bit of a dramatic shift in the Dungeons & Dragons scene. You see, other people, normal people, started to realize that D&D is, well, fun. And wouldn't you know it, the game got popular. I mean, really popular. D&D podcasts? We got them. Live streams? There's a few. Animated series? Yeah, that was expensive. $1,000 miniatures? Yeah, I'll take 2. You see, it all got rather big, rather fast, didn't it? And in the span of a few years, Dungeons & Dragons was one of the hippest things that you could do. Now, you might be asking yourself, Fraud, what does all this have to do with anything? Well, you see, today, I'd like to tell you all a story. Gather around and listen, children. Today we're telling the story of a great and powerful wizard and how their greed brought around their own demise. It's the year 2000. People all over the world are crawling out from their escape bunkers and waking up from their end-of-the-world parties, only to discover that life is still, well, ticking on. However, in a little office in the north of Washington state, a group of people at a rapidly growing game publishing studio created a document called the OGL, an Open Gaming License Agreement. The company in question, Wizards of the Coast. The game in question, Dungeons & Dragons. You see, here Wizards set forward the OGL 1.0, a license that essentially allows a third-party publisher to produce compatible material using elements of Dungeons & Dragons, such as basic rules, classes, monsters, spells, etc. Think of it in a way kind of like an open source license you would see in the software world. Essentially, Wizards wanted other companies to create their own works and their own game systems to further expand the industry of tabletop RPGs. Also, though, it would create a sense of compatibility from game to game, as they are allowing other companies to create similar rule sets to Dungeons & Dragons. And the crazy thing is, it worked. Over the 2000s, numerous other tabletop RPG companies started springing up, publishing their own rules and works under this OGL. While in many ways this reduced the number of truly original tabletop RPGs in the space, as many in some form or another use some kind of skeleton of Dungeons & Dragons. But in doing so, it catapulted Dungeons & Dragons firmly into the pinnacle of the tabletop RPG space, solidifying it as the go-to TTRPG game. In 2004, Wizards slightly updated this OGL, to which they were asked a series of rather pointed questions, such as, how will this affect my content that I've already published, Mr. Big Corpo? They went on record saying, the OGL defines what will happen to content that has been previously distributed using an earlier version. Even if Wizards made a change that you disagreed with, you could continue to use an earlier and acceptable version at your option. In other words, according to them, there's no reason for Wizards to ever make a change that the community of people using the OGL would object to. Fast forward 18 years later to August 2022. D&D is the most popular it's ever been. The streamlining of 5e in combination with online tools such as character creators, digital character sheets, and online virtual tabletops have made D&D more accessible than ever. And as such, it's more popular than ever. D&D is everywhere. It somehow did the impossible, breaking into the mainstream. The time of the nerds is now. There was nothing that could stop Dungeons & Dragons. OGL 1.1. No. That can't be right. What's this? An internal leak of the document from Wizards of the Coast published by Gizmodo? Oh, God. No, this must be a mistake. You see, the supposed draft wasn't just any old update of Wizards' licensing agreement. It was a complete and utter overhaul, which explicitly stated that OGL 1.0 would no longer be an authorized agreement, which would mean that any business who had been founded on OGL 1.0 would have to update and come into agreement and compliance with this new license. Their business model would have to change, and it would have to change fast if they wanted to continue to sell their products. Okay, so they changed some things, but really, how bad could it be? Well, let's start with the elephant in the room. Royalties. You see, all of these shenanigans started because of really one little thing. Money. Wizards of the Coast is a large, massive corporation owned by an even larger corporation, Hasbro. You know, the one responsible for all those toys and board games you played as a kid. You see, the guys at Hasbro had a genius idea. Let's have D&D make more money by fucking over all the people who've used our OGL to make money up until this point. According to Wizards and Hasbro, the OGL wasn't made to subsidize major competitors. It sounds like someone was a little upset that they were losing their piece of the pie to other companies who were just putting out, well, better products. Their answer? Royalties. Make over $750K a year from your licensed work? Yeah, we'll be taking 25% of that. What's that? You need that 25% to pay staff and business expenditures. Sucks to suck, nerd. This is our town, scrub. Oh, as well, small little indie D&D company, I'm going to need you to register with us any new licensed work you intend to sell. I'm also going to need all your contact info, where you plan on publishing this, and oh yeah, what are you going to charge? Why would I need all that info? Yeah, don't ask questions, insect. Shut up and play by the rules. Remember what I said earlier? This leaked document indicated that the original OGL 1.0 was going to be dissolved, and any published work under said agreement could continue to be sold if you signed on to this OGL 1.1, essentially giving Wizards of the Coast all of the control. Oh, and did I mention that Wizards also gets basically all the rights to any content that the licensor creates. Specifically, it's stated in this draft that Wizards will have a non-exclusive, perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, sub-licensable, royalty-free license to use said content for any person. So, for example, you, my friend, publish a cool D&D book under this OGL. Well, buddy, Wizards can now use your book, your creations, your characters, whenever they like, however they like, and they don't gotta pay you a single dime. But would you believe me if I told you that it gets worse? You see, one of the more egregious lines in the leaked document said that Wizards would have the right to terminate any agreement if said third-party creator published some kind of material that is blatantly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, bigoted, or otherwise discriminatory. Okay, well, this doesn't sound too bad, especially when you consider there is a small section of the tabletop community which makes some weird racist content. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Warhammer. But you see, the problem is this last line, otherwise discriminatory. The document goes on to say that Wizards have the right to determine and define what is otherwise discriminatory, and by accepting said licensing agreement, you accept this fact and forfeit any right to fight this in court. Wait a sec. So you're telling me that giving this company the power to Thanos snap my work out of existence just because they deem it to be so is okay? Yeah, I don't think I need to explain to you how this could create a few issues. As well, there was, well, just a ton of other issues littered throughout this document. Some highlights include some rather bizarre rules on what companies could add and could not add to their virtual tabletop system, specifically saying that certain animations, such as a fireball, cannot exist in your tabletop RPG, as it breaks the line between what D&D is and what a video game is. In totality, what you need to take away from this document was that it essentially would massively tighten Wizards and Hasbro's control over Dungeons & Dragons and just the tabletop role-playing game community space in general, essentially killing off, murdering several companies who literally wouldn't be able to afford to pay these royalties, as well vastly overstepping the boundaries of their power over other creators' works. And the backlash was insane. Tweeters were tweeting, YouTubers were tubing. The story was beginning to circulate like wildfire, and little did Wizards know, but they had awakened the beast. You see, D&D is a very community-oriented game. It naturally has to be, as it takes multiple people engaging in a collaborative storytelling to play it. As well, the idea of homebrew, essentially creating your own original content within a D&D space or D&D game, has been an important part of Dungeons & Dragons basically since its inception. And over the years, many other popular tabletop role-playing games and modules developed as someone's homebrew. As well, the D&D fanbase has grown massively over the years since the release of 5th edition propelling it into a very mainstream hobby, especially with the success of shows like Critical Role. Combine this well with a little bit of outrage culture and a funny little social media platform called Twitter, and suddenly the whole world knew what Wizards of the Coast was up to. Over the course of the next few weeks, the backlash was severe. Petitions were created condemning the leaked documents and demanding Wizards change them. Coldwell Press, a publishing company, decided that in light of OGL 1.1, they will be working on a project that will be a direct competitor to Dungeons & Dragons, while companies like Paizo, the creator of the game Pathfinder, were looking to create their own licensing agreement for future companies to use. Throughout the first few days, Wizards stayed very uncharacteristically silent, with multiple Wizards employees eventually speaking out anonymously to journalists, saying that the company intended to ride the storm out, believing the backlash wouldn't actually affect their bottom line. So, to satisfy the community, they put up a survey link on D&D Beyond for the OGL. So what did the community do? Cancel, cancel, cancel. Thousands of community members began to cancel their subscriptions to D&D Beyond, an all-in-one site where players can make characters and purchase access to the new official D&D content. And cancel they did, in droves in fact, so many that Wizards was forced to finally make a statement on January 13th on said site. Now you'd think it would be easy to get an apology done correctly. Wizards, though, continue to surprise us. You see in the statement, they say they'll do their best to clear up many of the concerns around said leaked document, something that the statement very much wants you to believe was just a draft, but insiders at the company have spoken out saying that no, this very much was the finished document. If it hadn't have been for the backlash online from the community, this document would have gone into practice. The public apology on D&D Beyond was really rather odd, with some of the language coming off really as condescending, such as the "we really rolled a nat 1" line. In the statement, they go on to say that they will be removing any royalty structure, as well as much of the language which allowed Wizards perpetual free use of any content under the OGL, going on to say that our plan was always to solicit the input of the community before any update to the OGL. Another bold-faced lie, which we know was a lie from the internal statements from Wizards employees. To which the statement finishes off by saying they will be developing a new OGL, which they hope will satisfy everyone's needs. 5 days later, with even more community backlash, as prominent members of the Dungeons & Dragons community begin to lend their voices, such as people like Matt Mercer, the Dungeon Master for the show Critical Role, who has worked closely with Wizards in the past, liking some interesting posts on Twitter, which very much indicated how the Critical Role team as a whole felt on the matter. As well, Critical Role sometime after this point began dropping their D&D Beyond sponsor. Suffice to say, this was an absolute clusterfuck of epic proportions. In the span of 1 week, Wizards of the Coast had absolutely destroyed their reputation with their community, lost thousands and thousands of dollars in the process, and single-handedly caused the highest monthly sales of their competitive games like Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu. In response to all of this, Wizards would finally begin to show some cracks. On January 18th, Kyle Brink, executive producer of D&D, put out a statement. This was the first time since this entire debacle started way back on January 3rd, we've seen or heard a response from basically an actual named human being in Wizards of the Coast. In the post, Brink further apologizes, stating, "We got it all wrong." He explains exactly which content will be affected by the OGL, specifically written, PDF, and VTT content. As well, he walks back many of the more controversial parts of the original leaked OGL and declares that on January 20th, they will release a new proposed OGL for the community to review, to which they will report back on the results of the survey some days later. A week later, and Brink was back. With thousands and thousands and thousands of survey results in, it was clear the community wanted nothing to do with this new proposed edition of the OGL, known as OGL 1.2. While it was better than the original leaked document, the community remained strong, having already seen the true intentions of what this big corpo had planned for Dungeons & Dragons. It had been made clear to them that changing the OGL at all would not be acceptable. Surprisingly though, through weeks of public backlash and getting their name dragged through the mud online, having lost thousands of dollars from subscriptions canceled, the folks at Wizards finally got something right. They had decided that the original OGL 1.0 would stay in place untouched, and that they would be making the SRD, the Systems Reference Document, a group of reference documents for publishing D&D material, a Creative Commons license, taking the power out of the company's hands altogether. In a shock move, this giga-millionaire corporation was somehow actually swayed by the wishes of a bunch of people online, by a group of mad, upset nerds. The damage, though, was already done. You see, many of these smaller tabletop companies had previously used the OGL, and they suddenly had a bit of a wake-up call after staring down the potential loss of everything that they had worked so hard to achieve. We've seen numerous publishing companies and game systems sign off to Paizo's licenses, as many of these companies are rightly skeptical at the prospect of working with Wizards of the Coast at any time in the future. Many continue to play Dungeons & Dragons, but have transitioned completely away from any official Wizards of the Coast material. To top it all off, as we said earlier, we've seen that Critical Role no longer displays their D&D Beyond sponsorship, as well they no longer use the service on their game, reverting back to pencil and paper, with Matt Mercer and Marisha Ray coming out in an interview to support those pushing back against Wizards. Big companies being predatory to their consumer base is nothing new. I mean, hell, we literally see Wizards of the Coast do this sometime earlier with one of their other main properties, Magic the Gathering, all the time. The only difference is that D&D isn't like a lot of these other products. Companies like Blizzard can use predatory tactics to suck dollars out of their player base because they know that people will always come back to their products. Dungeons & Dragons kind of isn't like that. Because of the original OGL, it has a very unique ecosystem where smaller publishing companies and smaller tabletop games feed into the greater landscape that is Dungeons & Dragons. And so when things get predatory, like we saw in the OGL 1.1 leak, it has the ability to affect a lot more people. I'm sure that a bunch of people are going to go back to using Wizards and D&D products now that this whole saga seems to have come to an end. But the damage is done. Many people will never trust this company again. A company that, while has a lot of flaws, employs some pretty cool creative people who have put out some actual good content over the years, even though nowadays it feels like it's more of a rare occurrence to see. As well, many smaller companies who would have signed onto the OGL in the past will probably now never do so in fear of what might happen in the future. I don't fault Wizards and Hasbro's for wanting to greater monetize Dungeons & Dragons, as it is arguably one of their biggest properties. At the end of the day, we do not need Wizards of the Coast to play Dungeons & Dragons, to enjoy D&D. The only thing you need is an imagination and some friends to share it with. As always, if you enjoyed the video or learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. This video took a long time to organize and research all of the information that took place over the OGL, so if you do enjoy it, I would greatly appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe, as it really does help me out a lot. Let me know your thoughts on the absolute clusterfuck that was Wizards in the OGL in the comment section down below. Hopefully this is the last time we're ever going to have to touch this subject, but if some crazy stuff happens in the future, you best believe that we'll be here making videos about it. As always, guys, I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, adu.
Story that might be, we wasn't supposed to happen. So much talk around us, we became numb to the yapping. It was like 05, got my license to drive. Picked you up in my pop's car, went for a ride. Couldn't no one tell us nothing, that night was ours. All the stars aligned.